Hello again, everybody. Well, today we're in beautiful Tunnel Hill, Georgia, near an interesting little location. We are at the Tunnel Hill Western and Atlantic Railroad Tunnel. If you want to find out some more information about it, independent of what I tell you, you need to jump online and check it out. But we're going to have some fun today and check out some interesting stuff. So come on, let's go along and see what we can see. Yep. This is one of the places for the Great Locomotive Chase of 1862. Sometime I'll do a full video on as many places as I can hit along that Great Locomotive Chase, but until then, let's just check this place out. How about these baggage carts? Looks like there's some old school rails. Maybe. Yep. These are what they called Sherman neckties. What they would do is build fires on the rails and then bend them. It made them completely unusable.
Says the place is open.
So here we are in the middle of the museum. It's a pretty interesting little thing. One of the more interesting things about this particular museum is that they have golf carts. So for those that can't walk a long distance, this is actually a perfect place to come and check out some history. Now we are right here. I think we're going that way. But you can see that there's actually a pretty large park off to the side of where we are going to be going. I'm a little teapot. Normally I don't record in a bathroom, but the decoration on the sinks in the men's room is too good to pass up. This is definitely the way to go tour a place. It looks like we're going to the
There was a general in the Southern Army by the name of Hood. Right there lays his leg. Can y'all see it?
Yeah.
Then they wrapped that leg up so it wouldn't stink and smell so bad, laid it in the wagon, and they put the old general right beside it. Now, should he die before he reached here, is going to bury him as a whole man. So his leg's there, and he's buried in Louisiana. Now, this is a general store. These were big during the and early 1900s, and to me, they're kind of like the Walmart today. Right here, this is a set of post hole diggers, but it's probably a lot different than what y'all have seen. This right here is a corn sheller. You put a dry ear of corn in there, it knocks the kernels off, and if you're out of cornmeal, you can take what you take, knock off of that, and you can put it in this pedestal here and take this mortar and crack it up and make cornmeal. So you can pull it up, lock it back down, move it onto the dock, off the train or off the dock, onto the train or from the train onto the dock, either way. This here is but it took quite a few men to do this and roll the cotton, and they would roll it onto the train. One corner of the post office, the store was always the post office. So whomever owned the store was the postmaster. Down here, where they would get their drinking water, and that's where they put their spoilable items, was in the spring house. Mr. Austin was from Hawkins County, Tennessee. He was a minister. When he came down here, he brought his wife and 12 kids. The short time that he stayed down here, he increased the family to 19. Yeah, 19. When his first wife passed away, no, 16. It was 16. When his first wife passed away, he remarried and he had 3 more. So he is buried in Hawkins County, Tennessee, along with his second wife and his father. But his mother and his first wife is here.
Has to be definite upgrade.
If y'all want to, you can come on around and just meander around, and then we'll wander from here back through the house. Okay, this is a 6-room federal-style building from that time period. If you look at the windows, you can see the wall thickness on the outside around the house is 12 to 16 inches thick. We do have a piece of furniture that he brought with him when he first came down here, and that's this little washstand right here. Because there was too many years between them all, by the time the first 8 got old enough to leave home and marry, they were gone. Well, the second 8 was coming on. So 8 to 10 kids at the most was all that was here. Other than at special times, cook in this house. Even though they had fireplaces, they didn't cook here. They cooked outside or they cooked in a smokehouse. Mr. Austin was wealthy enough to have a few house servants. And that's who prepared the food, brought it in, set it on the table for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There's of land here in this house over to the county to keep up, and for the history. This is the farm that when Sherman entered Georgia, and the thing that he told Grant was that he was going to make Georgia howl. This is where they gathered. And he had 90,000 infantry here on this farm and 20,000 cavalry. But that's the way they done their spindles. That's how deep it was. Behind that wall,
1 inch thick, because they didn't have
at the head of the stairs,
2x4s back in the day.
down below in the living room is another bathroom. If you took those doors off, it's part of the room. Now it was the same way, taxed the same way in the north. That's where we got it from. But this is the room that John Bell Hood stayed in 3 days before he was shipped off to Richmond, Virginia, and fitted for a wooden leg. When he couldn't reset his horse with that wooden leg, he was ordered right back to Dalton. So he was here in Dalton, Georgia, when Sherman was here at his farm. And when Sherman made his move toward Atlanta, Hood made his move toward Atlanta. And at every location, in every battle, from here to Atlanta, Jefferson Davis thought the Southern Army should have stopped Sherman. He could. He had 2 men to Joe Johnston's 1 man. So he's outnumbered. Hood spends the night in Dalton. The next morning, really early, he gets up, takes his army, and he goes down into Alabama. Sherman heard about it. He gets his army up, and he makes a left-hand wheel, and he heads toward Alabama westwardly.
Now that we're done with the house, we're going to do the tunnel. And yes, this is the tunnel that was part of the Great Locomotive Chase.
cool air?
That is impressive.
Somebody's got the chiller on. This here is the rock and brick tunnel. They started building this April the 25th, 1848. The people that was employed to dig and build the tunnel were the Irish. They gathered the rock or quarried the rock in the quarries, brought it down to this site, and then a group of Irishmen laid the brick and the rock. There was 2 keels built here. They gathered the rock, the Georgia red clay, brought it to this site. The engineers put a formula to it, and they designed and built the 2 keels, and that is what the southern landowners ran, and that was the making of the brick.
Let's go get some more.
The way that they done this tunnel was, you took, the digging came first. Secondly was the crane. The crane was the one that picked up these rocks and set them over the wall and set them in place. And then there was a wooden structure where it would support the brick 2.5 foot thick, and they packed the ceiling with it. It did not move until the mortar was set. And then they would move it forward. So the wooden structure and the crane had to have a cutout in the center of it so that the miner's cart that they was using to cart out the dirt out of the tunnel went in under them. So you had people working on top of people. 17 years. Now, right here's the first little boulder that the Western crew hit. Half hole there, half hole there, half hole there, and a half hole there. Now, there was no dynamite down here in those days, black powder. So once they drilled the holes, they filled it full of black powder, they put fast burning fuses in it, connected them all together, and then put a pigtail on that. And when they lit it, that gave them time to get away from the explosion. This is one of the alcoves. It's built into the brick system of the ceiling. There's 7 of these in here. There's 5 of them this width. And in the middle of the tunnel, there's 2 that's twice that wide. So these were for the maintenance men when they were checking the rail gauge or a washout of dirt from underneath the rail bed. Now, back during that time, there was no such thing as crushed stone rock bed on a railroad track. The railroad bed was dirt. This tunnel was dirt. It was first from Atlanta to Chattanooga. The road bed was dirt. It wasn't until after the Civil War, when Georgia started leasing this railroad, that the railroad rebuilt the railroad like it is today. Now, these were also for gutsy citizens that thought they could make it through this tunnel without the train coming. So, if the train were to come in and you were in here, you better know where one of these things were so you could get in these things. Otherwise, you're just going to get smeared on the walls. Now, there's 100 foot through this one. This one was sitting at the right elevation and the right center. So when they pulled the dirt away from this thing on this side, they had them a chore. So what the engineers did, they decided to go to the top, chisel the ceiling out the way they wanted the thing with enough clearance so they wouldn't have to go back. And that way they used the body of the rock as a scaffold board. From the time they started right up here in the ceiling until they got through with this thing, right here, this Western crew worked in this rock 3 months. And right here is, everybody see this orange mark?
Yes.
Okay, there's one over here on the left too. This is the breakthrough point of the tunnel. They started the digging and working in the tunnel April 25th, 1848. October the 31st, 1849 is this mark right here. Or 575 feet in. And this tunnel withstood the Civil War because there was a cavalry commander by the name of Joe Wheeler took his cavalry division through here. When he got through to the eastern side, he dropped off 2 barrels of black powder. He got a good distance away and ordered his men to shoot those barrels, and it blew over on the eastern side, but it didn't hurt the walls and it didn't affect the ceiling. It just blew a big old hole in the ground. Double width alcove. It's got our switch box in it for our lights. Now, if you was this deep, those maintenance men were this deep in the tunnel, and a train was coming in either end of this thing, there was no outrunning it. If this golf cart will only run 15 miles per hour, and you still can't even outrun this. The trains would come through here at 25 miles an hour. That was their slow speed. So the only way you could get out of their path was to get in that alcove, chest to back, chest to back, chest to back, chest to back. You couldn't do it shoulder to shoulder. Everybody couldn't get in there. And then if there was a couple of wheelbarrows in here, the train took them. Now right here's another boulder, and I call it a pebble boulder. It's right here. Kind of looks like a chair.
Now, what's the notch out that's right there?
Where? Right there?
Right
there?
Yeah.
Oh, that's just where the rock blew apart when it blew apart. Now, over here on this side of the mountain, there's a lot of those in here.
What are they?
They are timber support holes to hold forms. Now, this side was all dirt. The digging was beginning to get too far away for a safe condition from the crane. So what the engineers did, they decided to form it from here out the end to form the walls. And they put tree timbers down in the floor. They put 3.5-inch boards on top of that, nailed them to it, and then they just stood them up against the wall. They did the same thing for the right wall. Then they went out and they got a pine tree, they cut it to length, they brought it in here, and they attached it across the pathway. That held the forms up against the mountain. And when it cut it out of the way, that left a 4-foot piece in this wall and a 4-foot piece in this wall. When that, see it? If y'all pass the light back, I will pull up slowly until everybody can see the.
I see it.
Everybody see. That tree piece is a cedar tree.
Oh.
Cedar will rot over a long period of time, but it takes a long period of time. This tunnel to this year is 167 years old.
Oh.
Half of that tree in that hole is already deteriorated, but there's enough left on the other half to last another 100 years in that hole. Now this is also the route that the Great Locomotive Chase took. The opening we're going to is the opening that it came in. When the general got to this point, it was out of firewood, but it had a hot boiler.
Oh.
Now, it had enough firewood to get it from here 2 miles north of the Ringo Depot. And it died, just slowly died. But when Fuller got there was nobody around. The Raiders had hit the countryside. Now, a little while later here, the Texas comes around the bend down there. Fuller pulls it up right here and he stops it. He gets off the engine, walks into the tunnel until he can see daylight. He comes back to the engine, climbs back aboard, and he tells everybody that's with him, says there's no point in us being in a real big hurry now. The engine is going dead. Now, when you first stoke a steam engine, it produces black smoke. When it runs for a little while and that boiler gets real hot, it's gray smoke. See, the blacker the smoke, the more incomplete combustion you got in that smoke. So that's what makes it. The lighter the smoke, the more you're burning the wood. So Fuller found the tunnel full of smoke, and it was gray smoke, because the General, when it got to this point, was running hard and that boiler was hot. So he just eases on through the tunnel, on up the road, and pulled right in behind it, just like he said he would. 2 to 4 weeks later, all the gentlemen that stole it, Raiders, were in jail, in Swain's jail in Chattanooga. And they break out 4 times. They're put back in there 4 times. They take them to Nashville. They put them on trial. They all have a death sentence on their head. They bring them back to Swain's jail, put them back in that jail. And guess what?
What?
They broke out.
Again.
Oh my.
But they put them back. They caught them and put them back in the jail. Now, these boys were all from the state of Ohio. Every one of them but Andrews. And he was a Virginian by way of Kentucky. He was not a military man, but everybody else on board that train with him was Army. So, after they had convicted all of them of stealing an engine during wartime, and they were convicted and had a death sentence on their head, they were sent to Atlanta. They pulled in Atlanta. They took James J. Andrews to Oakland Cemetery, and they hung him. 1 week later, they give a volunteer group of 7 men an opportunity to, and that opportunity was probably to let them go and get back to their lines. They hung them. 1/3 of them lost their life immediately. 2/3 of them lived a long life. Today, after the war was over, the boys buried in Atlanta, along with Andrews, was moved to the Chattanooga National Cemetery. And that's where they lay today. If you go up to Chattanooga and you go down the street where the main gate is, turn into the main gate and look across the monuments, you'll see them. Because there's a bronze casting of the General and the tender car on top of that monument. Every one of those guys, dead and alive during that time period, got the first Congressional Medal of Honor because of this raid. But it was a failed raid.
Uh-oh.
They didn't accomplish their goal. That train was supposed to get to Chattanooga. It went dead 2 miles north of the Ringo Depot. They were supposed to tear the railroad up. They took up rails. They were supposed to set the bridges afire. They didn't get to the bridges on the Chickamauga. It died before it got there. For that plaque tells you what I've already talked to you about. The right half of that plaque tells who the sitting governor was when that tunnel was dug, who the chief engineer was, the western engineer and the eastern engineer, and who the contractor was. And the contractor that worked for the state of Georgia was John David Gray, and he lived up here in Graysville.
This will be about the same speed as a train would have come back in here in the old days.
These are the headwalls that supported the bridge that came through the rock tunnel.
The old one, and we've got the new a little bit further. Well, one interesting thing that I didn't see earlier that the docent let me know was that you can let your cell phone be your guide. So call the phone number and listen to the speakerphone. And it'll give you numbers on these little blue stickers. It'll be able to tell you about stuff. So that was pretty cool.
I agree.
Why, Scarlett, frankly, my dear, there's that old house that we saw earlier. And we got some interesting railroad tools dating from the 1860s to the 1960s. So, I don't know. I think some of this stuff might ring a bell. Again, there's those blue stickers, so if you ever listen to the speakerphone, it'll tell you about stuff. Locomotives and trains of the Southern Railway System, from wood burners to the diesel-powered streamliners. You've got a pupil's railroad kit from the Southern Railway System. It was sent to schools as a teaching tool in the 50s. So, you know, this place has got a lot of history behind it. And thankfully they have at least preserved it so that people will know how things have gone. So if you ever get a chance to come down here, it's definitely an interesting place to check out.